So a few other pitchers that were floated around for the Yankees back into the rotation off the board. Ross Stripling to the Giants, Chris Bassett over to Toronto, as well as Sean Manaea. What do you think is the biggest loss for the Yankees there?
I mean, I don't think they ever were in on this guy, but I really like what Bassett did last year just because he was such a reliable arm. He pitched over 180 innings, and that immediately is going to earn you like a contract of at least 15 million a year at this market rate. And he did that. He got 21 a year AAV, and that's huge. He had a 3.42 ERA. So this is just a consistent back end guy who ended up being more of a three for the Mets just due to all the injuries, even a two at times. So he showed that he can pitch in New York City. So that might have been a loss that we didn't even really look into, and I don't think the Yankees even kind of cared to look into. I don't think he was ever on the radar because Rodon is the ultimate target there. Whereas on the other hand, you've got Manaea, who's kind of a reclamation project because he did have such a bad 2022. He was not good. But 2021 and even I guess 2021 after the end of the season, we kind of had a feeling that he might have gone to the Yankees in a trade from Oakland. It was either going to be him or Montas, and obviously we ultimately ended up with Montas, but we thought Manaea was maybe the more consistent, reliable one with less injury history that could just eat innings for you, which he can still do. But we ended up getting Montas, who we all have our opinions about that trade now, and like in hindsight, didn't end up that great. But there's not much you can do about that. Maybe trade him, but I mean he gets 3 years AAV and ends up with 26 million a year. I'm pretty sure. So solid deal for a guy that can potentially reacclimate his job and reaffirm that he is a decent starter. And then on the other end, you have the same exact value and years for Ross Stripling, who's a guy that we drafted in our player draft. And he was such a low key pitcher and just a starter for the Blue Jays last season, where he was a low three guy. And I think he had about 130 to 140 innings. It wasn't a crazy number, but it was enough to like really kind of get him over a hump at one point because they did struggle. Keep in mind when the Yankees struggled throughout that big gap, they were losing a lot of games too. That's why they never covered ground on us. So I think by the Giants ending up scooping him up, that effectively hurt the Blue Jays in a little bit of a way because he was such a reliable arm for them. Um, Stripling, I thought, might have been a sneaky little move if the Yankees did miss out on a Rodon. Um, might be a good guy to bring in as like a 3 or a 4, especially losing JMO. So it sucks that we don't get him, but at the same time, I don't really think he still fully was a key target for the Yankees in the first place. I don't think they ever fully looked at him.
Yeah, I think I lean toward Ross Stripling as that value piece. I would hope, like you said, I think really all the good, valuable starters are off the board now. And I think that means that we have to go after Rodon, and I think we want to go after Rodon. With Bassett, I never really liked that fit as much for the Yankees, just because I don't think Bassett has Cy Young potential or number one potential. I think he would be a number one for some bad teams. He was really serviceable for the Mets, as that number two throughout a lot of the year when DeGrom was down. But I think the money always seemed a bit big, you know, and in terms of what Rodon is demanding on an AAV value, um, Bassett got about 21 or 22 million,
21
or
on the dot.
21 on the dot, and Rodon at the high end is looking like 30.
Yeah.
I do think there is a 9 million difference, a good 9 million difference between Rodon and Bassett for sure. And you look at the objective of what the Yankees are trying to do. Um, our series this year, in the playoffs, we won two Garrett Cole starts and a game five at home. End of list. So like not to say our pitchers did poorly, but Rodon is in that tier with Garrett Cole, given
Yeah.
with his recent performance. Garrett Cole gives it to you year in, year out. But I think for the Yankees to really make a difference, I would rather spend 30 million on a guy who has that high end dominant potential. Because I think that the 9 year, the $9 million extra you spend on him has a higher payoff in terms of the team's objectives.
Mhm.
So that's where I always liked. I didn't really like the Bassett trade. I always obviously prefer Rodon over all of these guys.
Yeah.
Manaya's inconsistency scared me, especially given Montas. Like I know it's not the same person, it's different scenario, but Oakland might have tapped into a level of comfort, but he even showed a lot of struggles towards the end of his time at Oakland and as well in San Diego. He was solid. Ross Stripling, I always thought was a good deal for the money he was getting. Manaya was getting high money for that high end potential that he showed before. Stripling never had that, number one, number two kind of stuff. But last year, he was sneaky really good for the Blue Jays, had some really good stats. We obviously saw him a lot more than most pitchers, and I would have loved him sliding in as our number four, number five arm. To have him and Montas, like if Montas goes back to being good and Stripling's our number five, I think that would have been perfect. But let's just shift everyone down. Let's get Rodon number two, man.
Why not? Yeah, why settle when you can get a second ace? Like truly. And then what makes me more excited about Rodon? Like I was already elated about this guy, but if you go back and watch a lot of his games from this past season, his velocity rose going later into the game. And that's always a key indicator for me that he's not a guy that just empties the tank the first 3 innings and then he can't figure out how to pitch from that point on. No, he like saves some stuff in the tank for later on and he just gets better throughout the game, which is guys like what Garrett Cole does and then also what Verlander does. We saw both guys do that in the playoffs. So that's just something to be really excited about. And yeah, I think they've been just saving their money for that big splash because they could have settled for one of these guys that would have been a 4 or a 3 or a 5. But at the end of the day, it's like, why do that when you can actually get a fortified ace?
Yeah, and that increase in velocity towards the end of the year, towards the end of the game, is really healthy for a starting pitcher. Like that is something not necessarily improves their health, but kind
Yeah.
of demonstrates their health and their comfort.
I mean,
So in
yeah.
terms of a postseason performer, like you want to see that level of pitcher.
Yeah. And I think that what we can all say that Garrett Cole gets a lot of grief from fans at from time to time. But one thing you can't knock him for, other than the little hamstring injury that he like, remind you he played through it in the playoffs in 2021. He is the most durable pitcher that I've seen the Yankees have in a long time, and he goes out there and he's willing to give 8 innings every outing. And obviously, we know that Carlos Rodon has his own injury history, and it's not a clean record for the most part. But the last 2 years, he's been really good, and there was a little bit of worry about dead arm in 2021. But I'm going to look at most recent memory. That's the best sample size to use because it's the biggest sample size to use, and he's just looked better and better every time he goes out there. And I can guarantee you that Cressy and Matt Blake would work diligently to make sure that he is at top class health, moving forward, especially if they do commit to a 6 year, 7 year deal.
And Rodon it's no fluke. Cy Young type season in 2021 until he faded off at the end because of some injury. And then last year, full season, led MLB, mind you, like including Sandy Alcantara and Justin Verlander in FIP,
Yeah.
which is, fielding independent pitching, basically ERA, expected ERA, taking away like your fielders, and park factor. So I think he's transferable to the Yankees and he's ideal.